Now, if we click on the stop button, we're going to do a couple of things. Okay, so let's access the stop button using its ID, which is stop button, and let's use the click method as we've done before. So inside this method, we're going to have a function. So we're going to do a couple of things. So first of all, we are going to show the resume and reset buttons. So to do this, we're going to use again the hide show buttons function, and we're going to place two parameters there. So the first one is the ID of the resume button, and the second one is the ID of the reset button. Okay, and to stop the counter, we're going to need to use the function clear interval and pass the action variable to it. Okay, so clear interval applied to the variable action, where we store the output of the set interval function. Okay, all right, now let's move to clicking on the resume button. So we're going to use the same syntax, more or less. So we are clicking on the resume button, and we are doing a couple of things there. So first of all, we are going to show the stop and lap buttons. So we're going to use the hide show buttons function. So we are showing stop and lap. And we're going to start the counter. Okay, so start action is for starting the counter. So to start the counter, we're going to do like we did before by calling the function start action. Okay, and then if we click on the reset button, we are going to reload the page. So to reload the page, the syntax is location.reload. Okay, and we have covered this function before. Okay. And finally, if we click on the lap button, so we're going to do a few things. So we are going to check if we are in mode on, and if yes, we're going to execute these three actions. Okay, if not, which means that we have just loaded the page, we're not going to do anything. Okay, so if you click on lap and the page has just loaded, we're not going to do anything. So we're going to check if mode. Just remember that mode is a boolean. Okay, we didn't use false or true, but using 0 or 1 is the same. So if mode, we are going to do all this. So we're going to stop the action, and as we've done before, we are going to use the function clear interval applied to the action variable, and then we're going to reset the lap. So to reset the lap, we're going to go to the lap counter and set it to 0. Okay, because the lap is going to start from 0. So once we click on lap, if you look at this, this is going to start from 0. And this means that the counter of the lap has started from 0. Okay, so the lap counter becomes 0. Okay, and then we're going to print the lab details. So I'm going to use a function for this. I'm going to call it add lab. That's what we're going to define in a bit, and then we're going to start the action again. And to do that, we're going to do start action. Okay. So now let's define this function add lab. So this function is going to print the lab details inside the lab box. Okay, so let's define it. So function add lab. So to start, let's do something really simple. So let's create a div and call it my lab details. Okay, it's going to be a simple div. Okay, and let's write something inside the div lab, and let's add this div to the labs box. So you're going to select this div and append it using the append to method. So you're going to need the ID of the labs box. Okay, let's have a look. So the ID is labs. Okay, so let's save and try this, make sure it's working. So if we click on lab, so now we can see the new div appearing there. If we click again and again and again, at some point we can see that the height of our labs box is going to be limited, and we're going to need to scroll down to see all the elements inside. Okay, now let's have a look at our final app and see what we need to place inside the labs box for each lab. So we need to write lab followed by the lab number. Okay, and we need to write the details of the lab, or the duration of the lab, so minutes, seconds, and centiseconds. Okay. So we're going to change our div. So we're going to place two divs inside. So one div for the title of the lab, which is going to be lab followed by the lab number, and another div where we're going to place a few spans. Okay, and this div is going to be floating to the right. So you're going to go again to the CSS file and do some styling in there. So okay, I'm just going to cut this to pieces for readability reasons. Okay, so inside this div we're going to have two divs. So the first one is going to be the title. Okay, and then the second one is going to be the lab details. Okay, so inside the title we are going to write lab followed by the lab number. Okay, So that's going to be lap plus the lap number, and for this we're going to use the lap number variable. Okay. And before we do that, at the beginning of the function, we will need to increase the lap number every time by 1. Okay. So for the first lap, the lap number at the beginning equals 0. So before we use that number, we're going to increase it by 1 to print the first lap, which is lap plus 1. Okay. So that's the title of the lap. Now let's go to the details of the lap. So we want to show the minutes, seconds, and centiseconds. Okay. So inside this div, we are going to have a few spans. Okay. So first span. Inside the span, we're going to write the minutes. And again, we want to format the minutes before we place them here. So we're going to use the format function as we created earlier. And we're going to format the lap minutes. Okay. And we're going to close our span. Okay. Now we'll need another span for the seconds. So let's just copy this to make it simple. So that's going to be lap seconds. And again, lap centiseconds. Okay. And between each two, we are going to place a colon. So it's going to be just before the second span and just before the third span. Okay. So now let's save this and try. Okay, so we can see the details there. Okay. So this is working perfectly. Now we just need to add some styling. So let's go to our CSS file. Or before we do that, let's just give these elements a few classes. Okay. So the div that we are adding, let's give it a class lap. Okay. By the way, I'm using single quotes outside. Okay, so I'm using double quotes inside. If you use double quotes outside, make sure you use single quotes inside. Okay. So let's go to the first div and give it a class lap time title. Okay, and let's go to the second div and give it a class lap time. So let's save this. Okay, let's refresh our live preview so that we can see the styling live. Okay, now let's go to our CSS file. Okay, so we're going to start with the containing div, which is the div of class lap. Okay. Okay, so we're going to access the class lap. Okay, so we're gonna make the height slightly bigger. Okay, and also we're gonna give it some border bottom, and also we're gonna need some margin between each 2 elements. Okay, so let's set the height to 50 pixels. Okay, also let's give it a border bottom. So we're going to go for a width of 1 pixel and a solid style, and for the color we're going to go for a white color. Okay, that looks good. And let's give it some margin. Okay, margin bottom or just margin. Okay, we can set the margin even from these sides. Okay, and let's set that to 15 pixels. Okay, and that looks better. Now let's move to the next one, which is the lab time title. Okay. Okay. So the title has got a font size slightly bigger, okay, and also we can force it to flow to the left if we want to. So font size, let's make it 1.5 EM, and let's make it float to the left. Okay, and let's move to the last one, which is class lab time. Okay, again we're going to change the font size and we're going to make it float to the right. So let's go for a bigger font size like that, and let's make it float to the right like this. Okay, and that looks really good. Let's save this. Okay, let's refresh the page. Okay, let's try our app. Okay, labs are working. If we click on the stop button, it stops. If we resume, it resumes. Okay, if we click on the reset button, it refreshes the page. Okay, so one slight change we need to do here. So we want to change the order of the labs, because when we click on the lab button, the last lab is the one showing at the top. Okay, and that's not exactly what we have here. So let's change this. So rather than appending the div to the labs box, we are going to prepend it to the labs box so that it shows at the top. Okay, so we're going to use the function prepend to rather than append to. So if we save, so let's try this again. Okay, and now we can see the last lab appearing at the top. Okay, and our app is complete. Congratulations, you have just created a highly professional app using HTML, CSS, jQuery, and Bootstrap. You had a chance to practice many of the skills you have learned in those chapters. If you created something different, then please share with me and other students. I look forward to seeing you finishing other projects and becoming a highly skilled and professional web developer.